Hey everybody, welcome back to Record-ology. This is going to be very interesting and hopefully informative too. Before we get started, I want to let you know that we've got some big news to share with you at the end of today's show. So don't forget to stay tuned for the outro. We'll let you know all about it. So the scenario comes up happily in our lives from time to time where we are presented with a new item, new to us, a used item that we are interested in purchasing, but we don't want to have buyer's remorse. No, we want to be thankful and very much satisfied with our purchase. And sometimes that requires a little bit of due diligence on the front end. It can be easy to overlook these things and then later regret it. So I'm going to show you exactly how to find out whether or not this turntable you want to buy sucks or not. You're not going to want to miss this. Okay, so the big day arrives and you're ready to go look at a new turntable. Maybe you're just getting into this whole vinyl thing. Maybe you're just getting back into it. Or maybe you're just trying to get another turntable, an extra turntable. These are some very practical, real-world tips and tricks and warnings to help that experience go as good as possible. So if you are like me, I am a very impulsive person. I have to force myself to slow down and think things through. And when it comes to buying a turntable, that can be a bad thing because in an impulsive situation, you may overlook something. So I want to go through using a real world example. We have a turntable here. We're going to pretend that I'm not familiar with it. This is a Gemini XL BD10 that a viewer sent in, and I'm very thankful for it. It's very cool. We reviewed it, by the way, if you want to see that review. But I'm going to act like this is on a store shelf, and I'm going to show you how I would recommend you approach that situation and what to look for, et cetera, et cetera. So slowing down is the biggest thing. Slow down. If you're excited, you see the price tag, and you're like, let's go for it, you may get home and be disappointed. It's happened to me, so I don't want that to happen to you. We've talked about price in the past. Really quickly on price, when you're looking at a turntable, and the difference between a turntable, I always say, is a turntable does not have built-in speakers, where a record player has built-in speakers. A lot of the same principles we're going to talk about would apply to both, but I'm focusing today on a turntable. Price-wise, there's a lot of variables, but I would just tell you quickly that a used vintage unit like this shouldn't cost you more than $20 to $50 if it's a fairly entry-level or even mid-range unit. Brand name doesn't really matter. So if it's Sony, if it's Panasonic, if it's Technics, don't think that just because it has that name, you need to be paying a ridiculous price. So do your homework, make sure that it's a decent price. And we've talked about that before. So the first thing I'm going to look at is its physical condition. So we see that the dust cover has a lot of dirt and junk and mysterious hairs on it. And that's okay. That's superficial. That's stuff that can be cleaned off. But the dust cover itself, you want to look for scratches. And not that scratches immediately rule it out, but scratches are going to be something that you're going to want to be aware of. So I recommend lifting the unit up, kind of looking at it at different angles, making sure there's no big cracks in there. And the reason why I bring up the dust cover is that replacing these can be pricey. And as I learned, sometimes buffing out scratches and things can be harder than you would think it would be. So make sure you're happy with the condition of the dust cover. Now, if you come across a unit that has no dust cover like this, I would caution you to not just immediately dismiss that as not important, because a turntable is going to obviously collect whatever dust you have in your space, and no matter how clean you keep it, trust me on this, there will still be dust depositing over that unit. It's just a fact of life. So you may say, well, I'll just throw a towel over it or a soft cloth. Those have a tendency to get hung up on the stylus and rip those out of place. They don't look as good. They're just more of a hassle. So a dust cover is almost a necessity. It's something to be aware of. Also, take a look and see if it has any accessories that come with it. or I don't even know if this is an accessory, but like the manual, this is a nice to have. Not, completely frequently, I should say, not very often do I see a manual with an old vintage turntable, but if it has it, hold on to this because there could be some useful information like what cartridge it recommends replacing it with, specifications, etc., etc. So the next thing we're going to do is look what I call under the hood, under the dust cover, and say, okay, what do we got here? And is this good to go or not? And if you're a newbie, you may not know what to look for. And again, that's what I really want to focus on. The first thing is the platter. And this particular platter is missing something. And if you know what that something is, you will be, typing away really quickly. Don't worry, I've purposely set this up to fail on certain aspects of my check, my pre-sales check. So we're going to go through those. The first thing is it's missing a platter mat. You need a platter mat. So you could put your record on the platter directly. It would not be optimal. It could scratch your record because it's a hard plastic surface. It's got ridges and things, and it's just not designed to work like that. You can get an aftermarket platter mat, but it's best if you get one that comes with it. Another consideration to a lot of this stuff is if you're like me, you want to buy the record player and take it home, or the turntable, take it home and use it today. You don't want to have to go order stuff. I'm not that patient. So if you don't want to have to wait to experience it, you're going to want to make sure some key elements are in place. So the platter mat is important. You can buy these online, but keep in mind that could be, anywhere from $5 to $10 and up to $30 to replace this. So the platter mat is a consideration. In terms of condition or type, that's not as important for a beginner or, just getting it up and running. We have done a lot of shows on what the different platter mat materials and types are for and why somebody would want that. But if you see that it does have a platter mat, that is good. Now, all turntables don't necessarily have a platter mat. Some are designed to work without it. Case in point is this unit right here. This is an entry-level unit, but as you can see, this platter, which is smaller, doesn't have a platter mat. That is plastic, but it has these rubber nubs that are designed to support the record and cushion it to a degree. So if it's not designed to have a platter mat, then that's not a red flag. But if it is designed to have one like this and it's missing, be aware of it. The next thing, and this could actually be a good thing, is to check the belt. Now, not all record players' turntables are belt driven. A lot of the Technics units are direct drive, and a lot of people love direct drive. That basically means that the motor either is the platter itself or is directly connected to the platter, and therefore doesn't require a belt. I would say 90 to 95% of entry-level and vintage turntables, though, are going to be belt driven. And what happens a lot of the times is people don't realize that there's a belt. But some people would never take the platter mat off to begin with. And even if they do know that there's a belt, they don't know how to check for it, or they don't want to deal with it. That one day the turntable stops turning and they just, donate it to Goodwill. And then here it is in front of us to look at. So sometimes I've literally seen this happen. The belt literally just fell off the motor spindle. And so all you have to do is put it back on and you're good to go. By the way, this particular platter does lift off, and the belt goes around this sub platter here, and sometimes it can just fall off the motor spindle and be resting right there on the sub platter, and all you need to do is put it back on. But sometimes the belt is missing. It just magically has disappeared, or it's broken, it's disintegrated. So make sure that you can account for the belt, because everything could be perfect and you get home and you're like, there's no belt, it's not moving. And you've got a scenario on your hands that's not ideal. Further to that, make sure that the belt is in good condition. You want to make sure that the belt ideally doesn't have any crimps in it. And this one has a crimp, as you can see right there. That just means that it probably spent years with that crimp position, sitting around that spindle, putting that little crimp in there. It's not going to add to or make a huge performance difference, but ideally your belt wouldn't have that. An issue that this belt does have is it's just too loose. It's stretched out. As you can see, it should conform to the underside of that sub platter and be able to turn upside down without falling off, and this one doesn't. Now, this one is just barely tight enough that it will function. This belt is a great candidate for boiling. And you may be saying, what are you talking about? I'm going to do a video on this, but basically if you put a rubber belt in boiling water for a period of time, it can shrink and contract it and tighten it up. And you can sometimes get extra life out of a belt. So be cognizant of the belt condition, that it's there, that it's in place, and that something you need to consider, because these belts are available, but it could be another week or two until the belt arrives, and another $10 or so, maybe even a little bit more for that belt. So we want to make sure that it has the belt. Okay, so we've covered the dust cover, we've covered the platter mat, and the belt underneath. Pretend that I put that back on. What else do we need to check? Well, if you have a turntable that's more than just one speed, which pretty much everyone is, you're going to want to probably have a 45 adapter. And the 45 adapter often rests on these little pegs back here. So if you notice there's no 45 adapter, you'll need to get one. I would recommend this awesome Record-ology custom made 3D printed 45 adapters that we offer. But if you want to be boring, you can get the original manufacturer's version. And the thing about it is that, again, if you wanted to play a 45, a record with a large hole, you wouldn't be able to do that on day one unless you had that 45 adapter. So something to consider. All right. I'll put this one back. Okay, the next thing is you really need to focus on the tone arm. So if you look at this tone arm, people that have been doing this for a little while will instantly recognize two major problems. Turntables, generally speaking, have a counterweight, and I've seen it before. You go to the thrift store and it's just missing this. Without the counterweight, the needle won't stay in the groove. You can't play the record. And if it's missing, I would walk away from a record player for sale in most cases, unless it was one I just really, really wanted. If the weight on the back, this one also has this back piece needs to be screwed in tight. But this would be a problem because you need the right appropriate counterweight. It needs to be the one that came with it. So unlike a platter mat or a 45 adapter or even a belt, it's more essential that you find the OEM part versus just any third party. That can be difficult, especially on a more obscure turntable like this Gemini. So if it's missing the counterbalance, unless it's just an incredible deal otherwise, I don't know if I would go for that. I don't know if I would go for that. Now, a little bit less of a critical issue, surprisingly, even though it's a major one, is the fact that this tone arm right now is missing not only a stylus, but a cartridge. There's supposed to be another part on here, and it's not there. And if you want to play records today, you can't do that until you rectify that situation. The good news is the head shell, which is this metal bracket with the connector on the back, are readily available, and it's a standard size. So in most cases, if yours has a 1/2-inch mount like this one does, you can buy any brand because it's a standardized thing. That's why standardization is our friend. So this standardized head shell, which is called a 1/2-inch mount head shell, is going to fit, and it just literally plugs in just like that. And now it's complete. Now it still needs to be calibrated. This needs to be, the balance needs to be set, and we need to configure it and set it up. That's a different show for a different day. But in terms of making the purchase, we're getting there. Now, further down this rabbit hole, I want you to take a look at the cartridge itself and specifically the stylus. Now, the stylus or needle is usually on a separate plastic piece. This yellow piece here is the one in this case. This is an MP22 phono cartridge, and the good news is you can buy replacement styli for virtually any cartridge out there. So if your cartridge is just missing, if you see something like that, it's just missing the stylus, and you can go online and buy these fairly easily. And the reason why I mentioned the color is oftentimes the housing for the stylus is a different color plastic or a different color material than the rest of the cartridge. And that's because the actual stylus is so tiny that it would be impossible for human hands to easily replace it. So they make it easier by making the replacement part this whole housing, which has the cantilever and the stylus itself. And it easily, as you could see, reattaches back on. So make sure that it has a cartridge, a head shell, and a stylus. If it's missing the stylus, like if I just walked in and I saw this situation going on where the head shell was there, the cartridge was there, but it was missing a stylus, I'd be okay with that, because I would just be able to go on eBay or Amazon and buy this for anywhere from, $15 to $45, depending on what it is. More expensive cartridges require more expensive replacement styli, but that's fairly easy. It won't allow you to play the record today, so if that's a requirement, make sure that it not only has a cartridge and a head shell and a stylus, but the stylus is in good condition. Now, that's the other thing. I don't have the right lens to show it to you right now, but this stylus is actually not working because the cantilever, which is that little metal pole, is twisted. So this particular unit I would need to replace with a different cartridge. I wanted to show you this one because this is the stock head shell and cartridge stylus combo that came with it. Now, I have other head shells rigged up with other styli and cartridges ready to go, so I can just swap it out. But if you don't have that already, just be aware that these are components that need to be there. Okay, the next thing isn't really a broken or not broken kind of a thing. It's just an awareness. If you are getting a turntable, and I want to specify turntable, not record player, that is vintage, such as this 80s era Gemini, there is almost a guarantee that it will not have a key component that you need to play records. Well, two. One is speakers. You'll notice there's no speakers built into this. As I said earlier, a turntable by itself does not have speakers. You need speakers. Either an amplifier, like a receiver plugged into speakers, or a set of powered speakers, or a sound bar, some speakers. And in order to get the audio out of this unit and into those speakers, whatever they may be, there is a component that is not included in vintage turntables that you need. And that component is called a preamp or preamplifier, phono preamp. And this is an external one, and external ones are required for vintage turntables like this. Not going to get into a whole lot of detail in this video about what this does, but essentially the voltage that comes out of a vintage unit using a magnetic or moving coil type of cartridge requires a preamplification stage before it plugs into powered speakers or even a receiver. Now, some receivers have a built-in preamp circuit, and if that's the case, it'll have a phono input on the back of it, the receiver will. But if you're using powered speakers or something a little bit more contemporary, you may need that signal to be line level, which would be indicated by a line input on the speakers. And so what happens is people need to accommodate that with an external preamp. Now, modern turntables oftentimes have a built-in preamp that's just a switch to make sure that it's either on or off. But if not, you need to account for the fact you need an external preamp. If you don't put this in and you just hook this up directly without the preamp, it's going to be super quiet, too quiet to listen to. So how much does the preamp cost? Depending on what kind you get, anywhere from $15 to hundreds of dollars. So Amazon is a good place to look. We've reviewed tons of them, including this phono. This is the Pluto preamp from Record-ology. It's a fantastic preamp. Okay, so let's say you've done all of that. You still don't know if the darn thing even works. And it's a risk to this. So if you buy from a store, you may have the opportunity to return it if it doesn't work. Be advised, places like Goodwill often only give you, even if it just doesn't work, will just give you a store credit sometimes versus your money back. Some stores have a place to power things so you can actually plug it in and test it. And you don't really need ideally you need a record to test it, of course. But outside of that, if you wanted to make sure that the motor worked, that the basic functionality worked, look for a place to plug it in at the store. Don't be ashamed to grab it off the shelf and move it within the store to a place where there's an outlet, or ask permission to do so. I've done that before, especially with tape players. It's very hard to tell. With a tape player, you can't just check the belt without taking it apart. With this, you can peek pretty easily to see if the belt's there, if it's working, and all that good stuff. So if you don't test it at the store and you take the risk to test it at home, be advised that these things don't last forever. Even these good vintage units that people on YouTube especially love to say are the best of the best, they are going to break down. They're going to just stop working. There's capacitors inside. There's electronics that can fail. There's power supplies that can fail. And obviously, you know, plugging it in, testing it out with a record, hooking it up to a sound system, some sort of speakers, is required to know for sure if the unit works. So again, one more time, make sure you slow down, take the time to inspect the unit, check the cabinet for cracks, any kind of discoloration. A lot of vintage silver and white units will yellow over time. Make sure that the feet are on the bottom, that the rubber isn't cracking. You know, obviously all of the visual things. Make sure the buttons feel like they can still move. Make sure that any sliders are sliding and they're not gummed up or stuck. And, you know, there's ways to mitigate things, but again, you need to take the time to understand what condition this record player is in before you buy it. Now, if it has an issue, you can address it. That's not a problem. If you know, don't think that just because it may have an issue that you always have to walk away from that scenario, but it may trigger a further investment, or not just in money, but in time. So just be aware of those things. Take the time, if you have it, to really inspect the unit cosmetically, functionality, and especially to make sure all the parts that are supposed to be with it are still with it. All right, my friends, and that is going to do it. I hope this was informative, enjoyable, all that fun stuff. If you have any other tips or tricks that you would like to kind of put out there for other folks, definitely leave those in the comments below. Think about giving us a thumbs up. That definitely helps us. Subscribing. We've got the membership program. And now, here's the news. We have all new merchandise. Now, our members got a sneak peek and a discount code to jump on this a few days ago. But now it is publicly available. This new merchandise is available for purchase. So definitely check out the merch shelf, the store tab, whatever they're calling it these days, and see what we have to offer. We've also got some very cool things coming your way. The plan is to really beef up the merchandise side of things, give you guys some options that you may be interested in. Of course, all purchases go to support the channel, but mostly I'm just thankful for you being here and watching this video today. So thank you so very much for being there. We got more fun coming your way, some amazing, fun, and exciting things in the works. Can't wait to share them with you soon. But that's gonna do it for today. So happy record hunting, and we'll see you next time.